Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Happy Sunday morning. A rare Sunday morning show for us here in the winter wonderland, otherwise known as Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Thank you for joining us. The local time is 8:49, maybe even 8:50, and we will begin this session H, called Yakutat Parallels, with Erin Donaghy at the top of the hour. That's about 10 minutes from now. Sure do appreciate you joining us live this morning, especially if you were with us yesterday morning. So I see we've got some 5x5s, and I guess I'll email Erin let me say hi to a few of you, and then I'll email Erin. Don't let me forget. North Central Wisconsin, good morning. Imperial Valley, California, Lake Chelan, Eastern Colorado. Therese is in the Netherlands. Ian is in Chuckanut. Paul's in Glasgow, Scotland. Seems like we have a number of Glasgow, Scotland viewers. That's really cool. I've never been to Glasgow. It'd be fun to visit sometime. Finland, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Red Deer, Alberta. Sagi, Puyallup. That's Puyallup Gene. Boulder, Colorado, Tacoma, Washington, Milwaukee, Oregon, Carson City, Nevada. Let me go down to live here. Things continue to scroll by. Good morning from the foot of the CPC. Hey, Steve, we're talking about the CPC a little bit today. Troy, Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, Los Angeles, California, Jarrett, Virginia, Granite Falls, Washington, exclamation point. The Tanana terrain up in Alaska. Hello, Don. Did I get that right? It's like banana, right? No, it's not like banana. Tanana. Tanana? Oh, shit. I already forgot. Sorry, Patrick. Boston, Massachusetts. Silesia. We'll talk about Silesia today. Linz, Austria. Hello, Harold. Nice to have you with us. I'm not sure I've seen your name before. Eric is in Anchorage, Alaska. Hello, Eric. Burlington, Washington, San Diego, California, Southeast Iowa, Tim, Everett, Washington, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Always a charge, feeling kind of sleepy this morning, but always a charge to see you all here. So I gotta up my game up. Come on, baby. Come on, boy. Just there's Kirk in Philomath. Hey, Kirk. So I'm showing off. Mommy cup and baby cup. What the? This is just two of many Kirk from Philomath creations that Liz and I have been enjoying for more than a year now, as far as I remember. I think Kirk drove these up, dropped them off at Vimmins, if I remember correctly. Thanks again, Kirk. Okay, I got to email Erin before I forget. How could I forget? Add the guest. Copy the link. Paste the link. Away it goes to Erin Donaghy in Purdue, in West Lafayette, Indiana. Come on. Let's go. Elma, Washington. El Cerrito, California. Good morning. Omaha, Nebraska. Portlandia, says Ken. Yeah, man. Camas, Oregon. We have 420 watching. That's nice. This is a rare morning for us on a Sunday morning, so to have anybody show up is kind of a thrill. There's Lindsay Malone. 3 hearts for Erin. So I'll show this a number of times again this morning, but since we have an unusual arrangement here, I continue to want to make sure people follow with what's going on. So here we are on Sunday morning, December 11th. Our next 2 shows, December 14th and December 17th, will be devoted to the Coast Plutonic Complex, aka the Coast Mountains Batholith, aka the Coast Mountains Belt. We'll get into the pros and cons of those names, and the name that I'm going to, well, you can maybe see what I'm about to do here. So Am I echoing to other people as well? Hopefully not. How's the audio? Can I ask one more time? Are we okay? Are we just, I have noticed, nitpicky time now. I have noticed that the first couple of sentences that I say when I start with you, the mic is like warming up or something. Like it's kind of warbled. Have you noticed that? I don't. It kind of bugs me that it happens almost every show. But it's probably fine now. But those first couple of sentences are like, I don't know. Okay, no echo. That's great. So thanks. I won't think about that. Todd, 50,000. You know what? I don't normally pay attention to the subscriber thing. But I got a bunch of emails yesterday from folks talking about Reddit. And I barely know what Reddit is. Every time I check in every once in a while when somebody sends me there. And I'm just not that wild about the layout. I get confused with all these threads and comments. I don't even know where I am or what I'm doing. But apparently somebody posted something from a pop-up geology video that I did where the gentleman fell on his chair, of course. And it's been like viral or whatever the kids say. So yeah, I think I gained like 1,000 new subscribers to the YouTube channel because of this Reddit thing, but I haven't even seen it yet. One of our kids texted my wife about it, and so she's like, "What's this Reddit thing?" And I don't know. So anyway, kind of interesting. Erin Donaghy, there you are this morning. Hello, nice to see you. Okay, great. So I'm glad that worked out. Yeah. All right, hi to a few more, and then I need to concentrate, but I got to make sure that I set the tone properly for what we're doing this morning. This morning's kind of a different show, and I'll have to explain that. Aaron's saying hi to Elaine. Can't even see Elaine. Oh man, come on, let's go. They're all saying hi to Aaron. Aaron's not even visible yet. Maybe. All right. Yeah, Yuki, I think it's your hubby. Yeah. Yeah, it is. I don't know. Yeah. What was that, a year? That was early July, I remember. It was super hot. We did it at like 8 in the morning. Wasn't that the one? Overlooking West Bar? Anyway, it's crazy what grabs people's attention. It's like dropping the hammer, super popular. And here's somebody falling out of their chair, super popular. Humans are weird. All right. A few more hellos. There's Gordon from Glasgow, Scotland. Excuse me. Uh-oh. Excuse me. It's wintertime. Come on now. Let's do a few more hellos. I'm live. Let's do a few more hellos, and then I got to start concentrating. I saw Switzerland. Hey, what's up, homie? I got to go back and get you. Where are you? Oh boy. Can't find it. All right. Mukilteo, Washington. Rick is in Costa Rica. Hello, Rick. That sounds delightful. Bellevue, Washington. Vancouver, Washington. Klamath Falls, Oregon. Kirk's from Sweden. Ottawa, Canada. South Wales, UK. Menominee, Michigan. Angola, New York. Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. Seattle, Washington. Heard of it. Montgomery, Alabama. St. Petersburg, Florida. Baltimore, Maryland. Rochester, New York. Plenty of North Americans here today. Bob and Kathy in Woodinville, Washington. Not in Antarctica any longer. Mammoth Lakes, California. Hello, Ron. I love that area. Mammoth Lakes. Wow. Just great stuff. There we go. Nick in Nyon, that's French, Switzerland. And right behind Nick is Stefano from Milan, Italy. What's up, homies? I got one part of my family from Canton Glarus of Switzerland. The other part is from northern Italy. Stonecutters from northern Italy. So what's up, homies? All right, great. Well, I think it's, yeah. I got 2 minutes to get my head right. Thank you for joining us this morning. Hope you enjoy this Sunday morning broadcast. We will start in 2 minutes. Hot mic. Okay. Wow. Your notes are back here. That's how together you are. Your notes are back here. What are you doing? Get your notes ready. You got to have your notes handy. Wait a minute. You have notes? Sorry. You have notes? Not really, and that's the point. So, as usual, keep things brisk, but there is no paper today. There are no results to share today. You got to set the tone early. This is a different kind of a show, and you and your guest know that, but you got to make sure that everybody knows that. This is a different kind of an episode. Hammer that quickly and early and repeatedly so that there's no confusion of the viewers. You can do that, boy. If you set the tone, then the pressure's off, and then you can do what you want. And Erin can vibe off of you and vice versa. So you just got to relax and let that happen. Don't force the issue. Listen as carefully as you can and go in the directions that she wants to go. You got no plan. You have no idea what you're going to do. You got a couple germs of ideas. You're just going to let it roll. But that tone has to be set first, right? Right. Set the tone. All right. You can do this. It's a piece of cake. A pleasant good morning to you all. A pleasant Sunday morning to you all here in the alphabet series called Baja BC A to Z. Thank you for joining us. Hope that you enjoy this episode. This episode is going to be different than the others. And I want to set the tone for that right now. Our guest is Erin Donaghy, and many of you know Erin by now because you have seen past videos. Last winter, we did an alphabet series, do you recall, called The Crazy Eocene, and that was in Erin's wheelhouse. She's doing a PhD right now at Purdue University, and her advisors are Michael Eddy, part of the Dream Team, North Cascades, and Ken Ridgway, who I met for the first time a couple months ago. But my point is, you have gotten to know Erin in the field, doing videos with her in the field, doing a video with her at a GSA meeting in Portland, Oregon, a little more than a year ago. Most recently, the three people, Erin, Mike, and Ken, out at the Olympic Peninsula talking about the Blue Mountain Unit and other field units. So we know her, I'll just say that, we know her now. She knows me now. She watches these shows. She's in the live chat half the time. So there's a lot of kind of synergy already. There's a lot of history already. And because of that, I feel like I can try this morning. And what is that? I want this to be kind of a workshop episode. I want to kind of workshop out some ideas. There is no scientific paper waiting for you today, and that's because Erin is in the middle of her project. And as she told me by email, and even when we tested the technology on Friday afternoon, she's like, I saw you in September, and things have changed already since September. We got some new dates that are coming in. I've got more dates that I'm hoping to work on in the next couple of months. And so she is generously joining us this morning prematurely, essentially. Major scientific papers will be coming from her and her research group, but they're not out yet. And so she's just checking in, and I want to just bounce some ideas that I'm kind of working on, especially after yesterday's show. And we'll just kind of play off each other. But are you hearing me correctly? this is not one of those shows where by the end, everything will be wrapped up nice and easily. In fact, do any of these shows end like that? I don't know, but this is different. And if you're waiting for some sort of conclusion at the end, it ain't coming. That ain't no whale. All right. So I hope that you can get what we're doing here this morning. I think there will be some major value from it, but now I'm putting pressure on myself to make it happen. Okay, so that's enough of a preamble. I want to start by talking about something called the Coast Plutonic Complex, because that CPC will be the main focus both Wednesday, December 14th, the next time I see you, with Robinson Cecil. You might remember her from last winter. She appeared. I'd like to have her back, and she has agreed to do so. And a new guest for us will be this coming Saturday morning for session J, Margie Russmore, who is a specialist on the Coast Plutonic Complex, and she's a former Darrell Cowan student. So between Erin this morning, which is kind of a transition show, essentially. We're kind of leaving the Nanaimo. This is a bridge or a transition show this morning with Erin Donaghy to get us away from the Nanaimo. We spent 4 shows, right, on the Nanaimo, and to get us to this Coast Mountains Belt or Coast Plutonic Complex. And I think you'll see what I'm up to once we get rolling. Will I ever get started? Am I stalling? No, I'm not stalling. I'm just trying to really make sure that you can see what we're doing here this morning. Hopefully, you can see it by now. All right, so these are the 2 real skeletal items on our outline today. And if you've got great eyes and crystal clear video, you can see that I have 2 different shades of green. So let me explain. He goes to Mappy McMap. Didn't plan on that. All right, so this is Mappy McMap, which is a exotic terrain map of the going from Alaska down to California. And this thing was built and colored by us 2 years ago when I was doing all this exotic terrain stuff really for the first time. And I want to point out right now where the Coast Plutonic Complex is. It's not there. The Coast Plutonic Complex, the Coast Mountains Batholith is not on this thing. Because 2 years ago, I made a deal with the viewers that I was going to try to learn about these exotic terrains in what I was calling the fruitcake back then. All these colors are parts of the exotic terrain fruitcake that were accreted to North America in the last 200 million years. And I made the deal with the viewers. I was going to ignore plutons. I was going to ignore magmas that were invading the fruitcake from below. I wanted to look at the fruitcake, not the stuff that was screwing up the fruitcake. And that's what we were doing 2 years ago. So the Coast Plutonic Complex, or the Coast Mountains Belt, or the Coast Mountains Batholith ain't on this thing. But we're going to start thinking about it today because, as we learned in the last show, the Coast Mountains Batholith is important. Okay, so I need to pick a name for the rest of the winter, especially this week. I need to pick a name and stick with it because these 3 monikers are used interchangeably. So I'll do this, I hope, quite quickly. Some of the older papers, as I can see it, are calling this thing the Coast Mountains Belt. The Coast Mountains Belt, kind of a nice matching image with the Omanika Belt, which I don't know anything about up in Canada. But I don't want that. I don't want the Coast Mountains Belt. I'm just talking about verbiage now because that word belt is confusing, I think. This is my choice as a teacher. The belt will keep coming up. The belt supergroup, the Precambrian passive margin sediments that are back in Montana and Idaho. Remember yesterday with the Lemhi subgroup, that was in the belt supergroup. And that belt continues up into Alberta and continues down to South America. Actually, you know what? I can do that. So not looking at the colors of the fruitcake, but just looking at the edge of the brown. The brown is the old Cratonic North America. And that's a phrase we'll use in January when talking about Paleomag, always referring, this has moved with respect to Cratonic North America. So Cratonic North America is old North America, is this brown here. And most geologists view this brown as this stable, old, long-lived, foundational part of North America. So this belt supergroup is on the margin, on the western margin of where the brown is. So we've got belt going from southeast California up through Nevada, up near the Whiz with Basal Country. The belt continues up. Okay, so that's what the belt is, and I want to keep that word belt tied to that old passive margin sequence or something related to that. Okay, good. I also, even though Robinson Cecil in her papers on Wednesday will use Coast Mountains batholith, I think I want to get off of that too. A batholith is, many of you know this word, a batholith is a large volume of plutonic igneous rock. A whole series of magmas that are invading the crust from below, different flare-up events, different generations of magmas coming up hot, and then they cool off and they crystallize into granite and tonalites and granodiorites and diorites and all sorts, cyanites, all sorts of things like that. That's a batholith. But the image of the word batholith to me, and probably to most of you, is a big old granite, the Mount Stewart batholith. Well, I want to emphasize that this coast plutonic complex, and that's what I'm going to lean on. So I'm going to use CPC quite a bit. And you know that I'm referring now from this point on to the Coast Mountains batholith. But I want to kind of tip my hat to the fact that it's more than just plutons if you look carefully in the CPC, in the Coast Mountains, in the Coast Plutonic Complex. I'm already confusing myself. So I want to use CPC and try to help you see that it's more, this is my view of it, and many, I think, more than just these igneous plutonic bodies in this thing called the Coast Mountains. Okay, you got it. So we'll get to dock and slice was an old idea that I want to revisit, but that's really the workshopping part of this. Let's get away from this first chalkboard. It's going away, never coming back. Old Greenie, you're going back, you're not coming back. Going back, you're not coming back, except I might need your colored chalk. Okay, seriously, are we going to look at this thing one more time? Yes, we are. At least one more time. But now that we've settled on CPC, you know what it means, right? Coast Plutonic Complex. Here's what I mean, and here's why I think it's important. I'm not bright enough to pick the right color for this. I'll just pick this neon yellow that I just found. All right. So in the last show, we had Brian Mahoney and Paul Link talking about everything in the Nanaimo Basin having an Idaho source. And rivers were carrying stuff from Idaho and dumping it into the Nanaimo. All right. And here's our Nanaimo confetti cake, which is not really confetti anymore. We realize that most of it's that same steady supply of old PCers between 90 and 63 million years ago. Now, with my yellow chalk, can I put the CPC in the most basic way? I think I can. I think I want to put it in here. The CPC, the Coast Plutonic Complex, as I've been playing for the last few letters, is part of the insular superterrane, is part of this Baja BC block. And you're like, well, wait a minute, didn't you listen to your guests yesterday? Oh, I listened to them. I don't know if I agree with them, but I listened to them, and I'm glad they were on. But I'm fluid. And I'm not all the way down to a 2.5 at the moment. So I still want to play with these ideas, especially since we're going to the Paleomag in January. So play along with me, please, the CPC within the insular block, the Baja BC block. And hypothetically, we have our Baja BC fault at the boundary between the intermontane and the insular. But you remember Mahoney really emphasizing that these two guys were joined at the hip. And if you want to have major Baja BC movement, Mahoney says, you can't do it here. You got to do it here or even over here. Okay, let's leave that alone. I have to say it. So if you were really confused yesterday, like here's these guys just telling a totally different story. Well, I told you this was contentious. I told you this was kind of polar opposites in many cases, even looking at the same data. And those rims those metamorphic rims, quote unquote, was kind of the key moment of yesterday for me. And I am going to the laptop with some stuff I've been reading since then, but I'm ahead of myself. So the idea is our CPC, and as we discussed this in the class yesterday, the Nanaimo, yeah, this works. So WR is Wrangellia. CPC is Coast Mountains. Wow. CPC is Coast Plutonic Complex. I got to train myself to do that. And the Nanaimo is sitting on top of both of them. I think most view the Nanaimo as sitting mostly on the CPC, but a little bit on top of the Wrangellia story. But our Nanaimo Basin, I'm slowly getting to where I want to go. Erin, this is a little longer than I want, I think. Settle in, okay? It might be 9:30 by the time I get to you. I hope you're okay with that. So this depositional basin is sitting on top of these two guys, firmly within insular. That's fine. Okay, how do I want to do this? It sounds like everybody, including the Idaho guys yesterday, want the CPC next door to the Nanaimo for a long time. Like nobody's talking about a major fault that's separating the CPC from the Nanaimo. So let me run with that for a second. If we have all of our grains in the Nanaimo between 84 and 63 million years ago, coming from the CPC and these exotic or extra regional or old PCers that have a distant source, is it possible that all we're doing to explain those metamorphic rims surrounding the old PC grains from Idaho is to have uplift of the CPC? And the key point is, it's not just granite in the CPC. What else is in the CPC? It's a plutonic complex. What is the word complex indicating? Well, if you view the North Cascades as part of the CPC, the Coast Plutonic Complex, then we know that there's more than plutons in the North Cascades of Washington. What else is in there? There's a bunch of green rocks. There's a bunch of ophiolites. The Ingalls, that's part of the complex of the CPC. What else, in addition to plutons and green ocean rocks, are in the CPC, otherwise known as the North Cascades of Washington? Meta-sedimentary rock, the Swakane gneiss, the Skagit gneiss. I've been spending a lot of time in the field with these folks over the last couple of years, trying to get a sense of all that metamorphic and meta-sedimentary history in some of those gneisses. So I don't know how to do it graphically, but I just want to kind of give you the sense. I'll just screw it up here a little bit to try to give you the sense that it's more than just granite in the CPC. And I'm wondering if our Nanaimo grains with our metamorphic rims, you're like, why do you keep saying that? The guys yesterday said they weren't metamorphic. I'm going to the laptop in just a second. If we still think those are metamorphic rims on those old PC grains in the Nanaimo, why can't we just unroof the CPC, make a mountain range, and have the rivers send stuff into the Nanaimo? Like I'm just using Occam's razor. That's simpler than taking stuff from Idaho. All right. So go to the laptop and show why I'm still bringing up metamorphic rims, talking to myself. Oh, a screensaver. Thank you for that. So I continue to, where are you? I continue to enjoy the fact that I'm hearing from many of you and that you are digging your teeth, sinking your teeth, whatever the phrase is, into those scientific papers. I think that's just terrific. If nothing else, that's a cool thing about what we're doing. That you guys are reading scientific papers that are not written for you. They're not written for me. People writing those scientific papers are writing directly to other people doing research on those things. There's no thought of us, really, in those papers. It's a private club. So the fact that we've crashed the party and we're reading these papers and can make some sense out of them to varying degrees, I think that's really cool. So if you've already clicked on Baja and you're looking for a paper for today, it's not coming. Erin Donaghy will eventually have some impressive papers on this topic today, but they're not. She's writing her dissertation right now, or trying to, whatever. I mean, we'll talk to her about it. So get away from that. But I did get real interested, as many of you did, from yesterday's show, where Paul Link in particular said, hey, you showed those grains from the Calgary group, and they said that everything was metamorphic rims. And you remember that from yesterday's show? And Paul said, I think those are magmatic. I don't think those are metamorphic. So I spent a few moments this morning going back to the Marie Bonvin, that's French, paper, co-authored by Will Matthews and Danny Coots from the Calgary group. And Marie in the Calgary group, figure 7, I think it is showing the subtle differences between grains in the Nanaimo that clearly are magmatic versus grains in the Nanaimo that are clearly metamorphic. And you're like, how can you tell the difference? Well, I don't know. I don't know anything about these zircons. I gotta listen to the experts. And they have showed us one difference. This is me putting the red in here just to kind of make it clear. So these 4 are grains from the Nanaimo with a OPC or core, and they have rims with a number 1 on them. And the number 1 is the interpretation of Marie and the Calgary gang saying that those are magmatic rims. So there are PC grains in the Nanaimo with magmatic rims. Link is right. And those magmatic rims apparently have a uranium to thorium ratio that's below 10. I have no idea what that means, but I think that's one thing I noticed. And here are the ages of these grains. But there are also in the Nanaimo pretty steadily rims that have a 2 instead of a 1. And the 2, the interpretation is these are metamorphic rims. And you're like, I don't see the difference. Well, we're not the experts. And there's a bunch more detail in that Marie Bonvin paper that I don't understand. Maybe you would if you slog through it. But they're helping us see that these are metamorphic rims. And the uranium to thorium ratios are way above 10. What does it mean? I don't know. Apparently this kind of striping is key to magmatic, and I think that's what Link was noticing. I'm not sure Link read the paper yet, the brand new paper, but he picked up on that in the Will Matthews show. But the Calgary group says these are different. These are metamorphic. And you're like, why does that make a difference? Let me go back to the other camera. Why does that make a difference? Who cares? Well, I think it should be obvious to you why we should care about that. If all those, let me go to, I haven't even started talking about the Yakutat yet, but I just feel like this is valuable follow-up to what we were doing yesterday. So yes, I'm still showing you stuff from the Nanaimo. We're going to get off the Nanaimo soon enough. But we're talking about these rims around these grains. And from the Will Matthews show, we were focusing on the fact that there's metamorphic rims around many of these grains. Now, what Matthews did not mention is that there's also rims that are magmatic, also in this stack from 84 to 63. And so when I showed this yesterday in the Idaho guys show, Mahoney and Link, and focused on just the fact that they were metamorphic rims, that wasn't the whole story. But why does it matter that we make the point right now that the Calgary group sees metamorphic rims that are younger than 100 million years ago that indicate high-grade metamorphism? The answer is, I don't think everything's coming from Idaho with the rims if there's a metamorphic rim signature. And what I'm starting to see, I think, is that the metasedimentary rock in the coast plutonic complex could be the source of those rims. Could be the source rock, as opposed to everything coming from Idaho. Just doing my best to follow this stuff. Back to the laptop, and we transition to the Yakutat stuff, and I'm probably going to go to Erin even sooner than I was hoping to, because I don't want to waste her time. So you remember from the Danny show that we had contentious zircon source. Did the grains come from Idaho? I'm starting to wonder, did the grains come from the metamorphic rock that's in the coast plutonic complex, CPC instead of CMB? But yes, we're getting that stuff into a submarine fan, and I'm reminding you one last time from Eric's photos what that Nanaimo looks like. These sediments in the Nanaimo are above sea level now. We can see them. We can kayak out to them. They were not deposited at this elevation. They were deposited in a deep marine setting. Okay, we have that now, even including these cobbles. Hell, could these cobbles be coming from the metamorphic rock in the CPC as opposed to coming all the way from Idaho? Just thinking out loud, bro. But I'm showing this to you again because, and now we're into the topic of today, this business about submarine fans and the floor dropping out and sand coming from the North American continent and being dumped into this submarine setting, that's not just a Nanaimo story. Erin Donaghy has been working with these much younger sedimentary rocks that are also submarine fans. I don't know where she is currently with dates at the beginning and the end of this peripheral rock sequence on the Olympic Peninsula, but here's our buddy Eric again, sending an email late last night, saying, I got some photos from the peripheral stuff. I think this is Blue Mountains unit. Erin can confirm or deny, I guess. But I already forgot the name of the pass. Sorry, Eric. But to give you a sense that we have a similar sequence of submarine fan deposits, and I'm just wondering what kind of parallels we have between the Nanaimo story from an earlier time and the peripheral rocks of the Olympic Peninsula from a younger time, even though these photos look very different than kayaking out to the Gulf Islands off the coast of Vancouver Island. They're submarine fan deposits in many cases with cobbles, with conglomerate class that Erin's going to help us talk about. So that's really what I stumbled onto late last night and early this morning. Wow, early this morning. And before I do a couple more things on the chalkboard, we're running late. Sorry, Erin. Before I go to the couple more things I have on the chalkboard, I want to read the email that I sent to Erin late last night, just to kind of be totally transparent about, like, I don't really know what we're doing tomorrow. Here are some thoughts. Maybe we'll run with it. And I want to read it to you just to let you know that these are all potential areas that we might go as Erin and I workshop these ideas. He goes to the email that he wrote to Erin. I'll just do this very quickly. Oh God, where is it? This is me emailing Erin Donaghy, our guest, late last night. Hi, Erin. Here are some themes I'm thinking about for Sunday's show. Number one, peripheral rocks and the Nanaimo similarities, ? Both have submarine deposits after a dramatic floor dropping, which happens shortly after a main accretion event. Why? And what does that mean tectonically? We might go there. Number two, potential idea for our discussion today. Erin, how is your detrital zircon work different than the work being done up in Calgary with that group? It's a different lab. Are you using a different lab? Are you using a different method? Do you have different goals with your detrital zircon work with those sedimentary units out on the Olympic Peninsula and also up in Southeast Alaska on the Yakutat? Idea number three. I'm still just workshopping potential ideas that may or may not materialize in moments from Erin. Number three, is there the same 20 million years of steady deposition of zircons in the peripheral sediments on a moving Yakutat terrain similar to the zircons in the Nanaimo, which is on a moving Wrangellia terrain? Or is the CPC variable enough, which is the source perhaps of her sediments as well, that you might have ways to document the long journey north of the Yakutat up the coast since 50 million years ago? If you're losing it, I'm hoping to do one more thing on the board to frame this discussion, and then we'll just see where we go with Erin. Hope it works for you, everybody. Final idea. What is the known rate of the Yakutat terrain moving northward along the Queen Charlotte Fault, like today or recently? Is it laughably slow compared to the Baja BC rates that are needed to get Mount Stewart from Baja to Ellensburg? Thank you, Nick. All right. Last thing I'm doing, 5-minute warning, Erin. Last thing I'm doing is I'm just throwing out an idea which may or may not be helpful, and that is, this is one of those that might be incredibly laughable. But we know that the insular superterrane accreted 100 million years ago. At least in our series, that's what we know. 100 million years ago, the big hit with basal tick-off, and then we run the thing up the coast, post 100 million years ago. I'm wondering if that hit of the insular 100 million years ago and the hit of Silesia / Yakutat 50 million years ago has the same 5 steps, roughly. And if they don't, why don't they have the same steps? You can read as well as I. So visually, we're having this super terrain, whether it's 100 million years ago or 50 million years ago. You with me? Insular or Silesia. We're jumping back and forth between those two things, just like we were doing last winter in this series. Whether it's insular or Silesia, you know what I mean, we approach this thing, we hit it, we collide with the coast. The floor is dropping with both. Now, in the case of the insular, we hit 100 million years ago, and it's not until 84 million years ago that the floor starts dropping, showed by the Nanaimo, demonstrated by the Nanaimo sediments. So that's a 16 million year delay between hitting, getting excited now, hitting the insular, and then 16 million years later, the floor suddenly drops, and we start dumping all that sediment from Idaho or from a more nearby source, the CPC, into the Nanaimo Basin, including those old PC grains from Idaho that everybody agrees upon. Erin's got the same sudden drop, but I don't think I know she doesn't wait 16 million years after Silesia hits. That floor dropping is almost immediate, but we'll get more resolution from Erin in just a second. I just find it interesting that there's that same dropping of the basin right after we hit. If anything, I would expect the crust to get thicker and we develop mountains with a major superterranean accretion. Why are we hitting and then dropping almost immediately 50 million years ago? And why did we do the same kind of dropping with a delay, admittedly, 50 million years before that? Finally, we know those submarine fan deposits exist because they have been lifted out of the ocean, and they're either off by Jerome Lessman's house in the Nanaimo or up in the heart of the Olympic National Park with the peripheral rock sequence that Erin was showing some of us in that field video. Is it even worth it? Maybe you've got it, at least what I'm driving at, but I guess I did. I'll leave this up as something that we might be able to use. But if you followed what I was saying just a second ago, again, just workshopping ideas, we may or may not use this, but I'm trying to show a map view 100 million years ago and 50 million years ago. 100 million years ago, it's the insular superterranean. Now hold on, are you sure that it's eastward subduction? Maybe it's westward subduction. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Let's just do the most conventional, at least just get the idea. This thing is approaching, it's colliding, the floor is dropping, the sediment's dumping, and then we eventually get the stuff back out of the water. Those are the 5 steps. And I'm interested in going back and forth a little bit, both in cross-section and in map view of those relationships. Okay, that's my attempt to set up our discussion with Erin. She may want to go a totally different direction. Who knows? Let's just find out together. I got to go get my headphones and also get a slurp of water here. Woo! Battery 100%. That's good. Let's see if we can find Erin Donaghy here. Hello, Erin.
Hi there.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate your time. I think your audio and video is really good right now. You must be approaching final exam week. Is that roughly where you are?
Yeah, final start this week, but I am not taking courses anymore. So it's kind of the same old week, business as usual for me.
Right. Well, actually, let's do that for just a second. So those that are maybe went to college but did not go to graduate school, what's it like as a master's student as far as how many years and what the process is? And then how is being a PhD student different as far as timing and projects and things?
Yeah, so I did my master's at Northern Arizona University with Paul Umhofer. And usually when I'm talking with undergrads or anyone interested in graduate school, a master's program is pretty condensed. So you're usually expected to finish in about 2 years. So the projects tend to be a little smaller, something doable in 2 years. But as a result, you have, course requirements. So you're kind of cramming in a ton of courses your first year in hopes that your second year will be less classes, mostly writing, and finishing up in that 2-year time period. I finished my master's in 2.5 years or 3 years. I took a semester off to intern with ConocoPhillips up in Alaska, so it was a little longer. But I think on average, usually between 2 to 3 years for a master's in geology is normal. And then PhD programs tend to be a little more extensive. So I had a master's coming in, so I got to take less course requirements than some of my other fellow grad students who didn't have a previous degree. But in general, you can spread your classes out a little more, so you're not kind of like overwhelmed with all the course requirements you have to take. And then usually you can finish your course requirements within a couple of years that, the last couple of years, you're just focusing on writing, getting your research finished and publishing. So the projects are a little more extensive. You might have multiple projects or little sub-projects, but yeah, so they're a little different. And it all really depends, I think, what you want to do afterwards and what you're interested in studying and what you want to do for a career.
Well, okay. Well, if you're willing, I've got a few more questions just based on that. So first of all, where are you? Are you in the middle of year 3 for your PhD?
I am in the middle of year 4, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know, it's hard to believe. I'm in my 4th year, so.
Okay. And not that you're counting the days, but is there a clear finish line? Do you know how much longer you will be at this PhD dissertation work?
Yeah, I just passed my preliminary exam back in September. And so usually once you take that, you can graduate within a year. So there is the possibility I could finish everything in a year. That seems like it would be a very rushed timeline to me. So I'm more than happy to, push it to a 1.5 years. So I'm thinking about a 1.5 years, and I'll be able to get everything finished that I want to and publish and be on my way.
Well, as I advise students who get interested in geology as undergrads, sometimes they go, my God, how much, do I really have to go to graduate school? And I'm like, well, I don't think you have to. There's plenty of people who have satisfying work with an undergraduate degree. That's fine. And then they're like, well, I'm already out of money. How am I going to do this if I have to do 2 more years for a master's? And if I want to get a doctorate, that's another 5 years. I'm like, well, it kind of changes. You can give us a sense of that, Erin, but like for me, and I think many, 2 things changed when you went to graduate school. One, you didn't have to pay anymore. There's usually some kind of assistantship to pay your bills, essentially. But 2, and more importantly for me, it was suddenly my work. I wasn't just sitting in classes and taking notes on other people's stuff, but for the first time, I was actually involved in the research, and I was kind of in charge of what I wanted to do. Have you had similar experiences, both at master's and PhD level?
Yeah, when I worked with Paul, he had an NSF grant already defined. And so when I was applying to programs and I reached out to him, he sent me their NSF proposal. And I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. So I had a project that was defined for me. And that can be really nice when you're, this is the first time you're in an upper level kind of a graduate degree program, that you're not sitting there defining the project. It's funded. That really helps. That means you're going to have money to go out and do your research.
Yeah.
So it was kind of this package project, but I was able to work with Paul, and he really let me decide, okay, this is what the end goals are, what we want to accomplish. But he allowed me to come up with a plan on how to tackle that. Like, how do we plan a field season? What kind of data do we need? And then how are we going to collect that and analyze it to answer these questions they defined in the NSF project. And for my PhD, I knew Mike from the Chumstick Basin. So he was a PhD student working on that same NSF grant from another university. So we met there. So when I decided I wanted to go back to school, I reached out to Mike, and Mike had just got a job offer at Purdue, and I knew Ken Ridgway was at Purdue. So it kind of seemed like this perfect alignment of people that I was very familiar with working with in the past and their research. And we were able to come up with a project idea together. So that was really exciting, because I was able to partake in the whole process of writing an NSF grant, defining project objectives, and then, continuing those, like, okay, now I got to do my field work, planning that and collecting the data, and now working on my interpretations. So.
Well, inspiring. And in case it's not obvious to the viewers, not everybody gets this opportunity. So you're very good. And those guys, are not just offering this to anybody. So, I mean, it works both ways. So I'm sure that they are enjoying your hard work, which I know about mainly through Instagram. I see your stories every day, and you're posting in the lab and everything else. You just seem to be working around the clock. I can't hold it. I'm going to ask one more thing. Am I putting too much pressure on you to assume that there will be some science papers coming out of this work? Do you have enough already where you clearly are going to be co-authoring or being the lead author with Mike or whomever on some of this work?
Yeah, we have a timeline and outlines for manuscripts we want to publish and when we want to publish them. So first on the docket is this methods paper that hopefully will be finished. I think it'll be finished being written by the end of by December. So hopefully we can submit it in January. We just need to go through it with some of our co-authors. And that's really a methods paper, just looking at what chemical abrasion does prior to detrital zircon analyses using laser ablation. So that should be submitted in January. And then the idea is to move on to the Olympic Peninsula. I've been working really hard getting all the ID-TIM, so the age data from the volcanics we collected on the Olympic Peninsula, so that we now have this really nicely established chronostratigraphy. And so while I kind of finish up getting the last samples run for that, I can be writing this paper that hopefully we can get it submitted by late spring, early summer. I do need to go back out and check a couple of things in the field, so I'm trying to see how early I can get out onto the Olympic Peninsula.
Oh, good.
So that there'll be about 1 more week of field work, and hopefully I can just test some relationships and then get that paper submitted.
Excellent. Well, let's go in that order then. Let's talk about the techniques first. I know that you saw the Will Matthews and Danny Kutz's show. I saw you in the live chat. Were you able to see the Mahoney show from yesterday?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
there. I watched it.
Okay. Oh, you were. Good.
A long time ago already.
Yeah, it does. So they're all working with zircon. You're working with zircon. They're all working with detrital zircon. But is that where the similarities end? Which labs are you using? What's your process that may be similar or different than what we've been hearing about from the last 3 shows?
Yeah, so I use 2 types of methods for detrital or for zircon geochronology, and one would be the same laser ablation, inductively coupled mass spectrometry. That is what we use to do the detrital zircon geochronology, and that's because it's a really fast method. You can analyze hundreds of zircon grains in one of your sandstone DZ samples, and the laser is just ablating that whole grain. It's just ablating off the top part of the surface of that zircon. And so that happens over a couple seconds, and then it moves on to the next grain, and it just keeps doing that for hundreds of grains. So you can get 315 grains analyzed in 4 hours. And so it's a really effective way to kind of establish these detrital zircon provenance on the detrital zircon spectra that we've seen now for the past couple shows, those relative probability plots. So we still go to University of Arizona. We have collaborators there, and we use their lab, their lasercron center, to do our DZ analyses. The difference is that I have been testing this technique where we chemically abrade the zircons prior to running them at the lasercron. And so annealing and chemical abrasion of zircons are kind of the first 2 steps for the other method, the ID-TIMS method, and that's the lab we have set up at Purdue University. And so that's a really high precision technique. And so we can get increased precision and accuracy of the ages of those zircons. But the trade-off is we can get about 16 zircons through the entire annealing abrasion. And then there's all of this different chemistry that goes on. You have to dissolve the entire grain, then put it through column chemistry. That can take up to 2 weeks for 16 grains. So we don't want to do that on detrital zircons. We want to do those on igneous or volcanic zircons. Okay. And so we can get a really precise age of a volcanic interbed or an intrusion. And that way we can use those if they're interbedded with the stratigraphy, the sedimentary rocks, then we can start establishing this chronostratigraphy, that if we have 2 tuffs, the package of rocks between those 2 tuffs, we can constrain the age of it if we have the age of the volcanic beds there. So we've been testing this technique. Well, what if we anneal and chemically abrade? Because annealing and chemical abrasion will heal zones of the zircon that have experienced any type of radiogenic damage or zones of lead loss. And then we'll also kind of come in through those cracks and we'll dissolve away any kind of inherited material or inclusions. So if we get rid of all that, zones of lead loss and this inherited material, what we're left with should be this part of the zircon that is not damaged. So then when we go to analyze it, it should give us a better understanding of the true age, or a closer, a more accurate age of that zircon. And usually what we see is that because laser ablation, that method, when you're doing it for detrital zircons, you don't anneal and chemically abrade your zircons. You just fire and ablate off all the material. So it's kind of an average of zones of lead loss, or if you had rims or you had cores, it'll average all that and spit out an age. And usually it's an age that's slightly younger. So if we go into a mount that's been analyzed by laser ablation, we pluck out all those youngest ages that are used to calculate a maximum depositional age, and we run it on the TIMS, then usually what we see is the shift that it becomes about 2 to 3 or 2 to 5 million years older, depending on the age of the zircon. So by healing those zones of lead loss, lead loss will make your zircon age trend younger. So if we heal them, then we'll get a more accurate representation of the true age of that zircon.
Wow. Okay. I think I got most of that. Thank you. So nobody's done this technique before? This is you and Mike creating a new technique, or has other people done this sort of thing?
It has been tested, but it has been tested on limited kind of set of zircons. And so we really wanted to look at how chemical abrasion would impact igneous zircons, a detrital zircon spectra. And then we also worked with the Lasercron that they sent us all of their reference materials. So these are zircons that generally, every time you analyze them, they have the same age. So they use it to calibrate their instrument while they're running analyses. If we always know the age should be that, well, they're going to hit a reference material, then they're going to measure 3 unknowns, and then they're going to hit that reference material, and they're going to see how it's shifting in age, and they can calibrate and correct for any of the fractionation that occurs. Mm-hmm. So we have all their reference material, and we abraded that, and we kind of compared it to unabraded and abraded aliquots, and we were able to see how the age was changing versus, if we don't try to heal these zones of lead loss. So the reference material, it all stays pretty much the same. It's really indistinguishable whether or not you abrade it. But then we took igneous zircons that experience like a massive amount of lead loss to see what happens when we abrade this prior to analyzing it. And we see this increased precision and accuracy and concordance of those zircon ages once we abrade it before we then take it to the laser. And then we wanted to understand how our detrital zircon spectra would shift if we did this for really large sample sets. So we took 2 detrital zircon samples, and we did N equals 1,000 on both of those, and we abraded. We compared the abraded spectra versus the unabraded, and you do see distinct shifts in the number of peak age populations as well as the age of those peak age populations.
So I should kind of keep this in mind when I read these other papers that are not using this technique, like their dates might be off a little bit, or does it even matter maybe with the scope of those projects?
I think for the most part, it's not a technique I would recommend to everyone, and that I will make clear in this publication that this technique would really only be useful if you want to discern between peak age populations that are probably within 5 to 10 million years. But if you don't need that resolution, then there's no point in going through all of these extra steps, because it's a lot of time, and it would be a lot of time, money, effort. And if you don't need the resolution, then there's really not a point in doing it. But we really want to see if we can get this type of resolution, and that links back to the Coast Plutonic Complex and trying to link the Yakutat's terrain's history, transport history up the Cordillera by looking at the magmatic flare-ups in the Coast Plutonic Complex and trying to see if we can get increased resolution in our detrital zircon spectra to actually be able to link up to these different magmatic flare-ups that are only within 5 million years age difference of each other.
Well, you're driving the bus just perfectly. That's where I wanted to go next, obviously. So before we go there, a little bit more with the CPC. What was I going to ask? Oh, do you have any experience with these rims and interpreting magmatic versus metamorphic, or do you want to stay out of that?
I do not have any experience with it, and that is mostly, I do have Precambrian grains that are present in my detrital zircon spectra, but they are most likely recycled from things like the Nanaimo. And when I do chemical abrasion, most often those rims or any type of inherited material is going to dissolve away. So things like metamorphic rims, one of the points of trying to use chemical abrasion to get, a good, more accurate age is to dissolve away the part that experience metamorphism, because that's going to have a way younger age or some different age than the actual, kind of nucleus of the zircon. So for my DZ, I have probably dissolved away any rims that are on there.
Well, that works out nicely for you this morning, because we don't have to pull you into that muck. But obviously, from last couple of shows, pretty big issue with bearing on translation. But yeah, let's leave that alone. So I am surprised. I think you mentioned it casually last week, maybe to me, but I am surprised you have some old PCers in the peripheral rock. So first of all, let's just do a couple basic things, if you don't mind, and we'll kind of build off of this. So, kind of a weird name, peripheral. Like Nanaimo is this nice, obvious kind of basin that's half sitting on the CPC and a little bit on the Rangelia. Am I right that we're just calling all these sediments that are sitting on top of Yakutat slash Siletzia the peripheral rock sequence?
So the peripheral rock sequence kind of refers to just the strata that are exposed around the peripheral of the Olympic Peninsula, which is how it gets the peripheral rock sequence name. But the peripheral rock sequence is thought to be part of a larger basin, the Tofino-Juan de Fuca basin. And that extends across the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and then also up the western margin of southern Vancouver Island. So it's thought that those rocks that are, we mostly know about them from drill cores, are all part of the same regional basin, and that would be referred to as the Tofino Basin in most literature.
How do I spell Tofino?
It's T-O-F-I-N-O.
Wow, never even ran into that before. Okay, so thank you. So Tofino is inclusive. That's peripheral and friends, basically, that are clearly younger than they're deposited on those. So the Tofino are a lot of submarine fan deposits and other things that are in deep marine, generally.
Yep.
Okay. So do you like going back and forth between what you've learned with us, with Nanaimo, and this? Like, I'm locked into the fact that everything's submarine and the floor is dropping. When did what date do you want for the accretion of Yakutat slash Siletzia right now, generally, and how quickly do you have subsidence before the Tofino sediments start?
So we collide Siletzia to the continental margin at around 50 MA.
Okay. Yep. Good.
And Siletzia, the basalts or the oceanic plateau basalts, they can be as young as, let's say, 48. So Siletzia was still being constructed as it collided with the continental margin.
Okay.
So this was we can kind of think of it as a hot collision. The plateau is very, very hot when it collides. And so because of this, it's going to behave very differently than if you collided a thick oceanic plateau that was cold or a little older. So it's really young and it's super hot when it collides. And so the first sediments that are being deposited, we think, in this peripheral rock sequence would be the Aldwell Formation. And so far from a tuff that is exposed near Lake Crescent, the age of that tuff, and I mean, I do have some slides, but we don't really need to use them at all, but that tuff is around 47 MA. So if those are the first sediments, the Aldwell, that's the first tuff we have that is 47 MA. What kind of throws a little wrench in the situation is that there are these rhyolites at the base of the Aldwell, and we've dated that now, and that is 52 MA. So they're significantly different ages. And so you kind of have a couple different options with what you could do with that. You could say, well, the Aldwell represents these sediments that predate collision. So there's surface topography on these plateaus. So you could have sediments accumulating on top of the oceanic plateau, and it collides. They're part of that collision, and then you continue having deposition following the collision. So you could be spanning this 52 to 47 age range,
Yeah.
or you can say that 52 MA rhyolite is an olistostrome. So it's come from somewhere else. It's slid down off the continental shelf in this big slide, and it's significantly older, but that's not the age of the base of the
Okay.
Aldwell.
But I'm just going to interrupt just for a sec. So is it 47 that you need to already be subsided, or even earlier than that? Or you're not sure?
I mean, we know we have accommodation space on there, whether or not there's pre-existing topography that we're just filling up some of those holes, or whether or not we're having tectonic subsidence at this point. It's probably a little bit of both, because, as we collide this thing, we know we're creating some thrusting. So we have some faulting going on. There's a ton of faults that cut through the northern peripheral rock sequence. One in particular that we're really interested in understanding its history is the lower Elwha fault. And so whether or not this is representing one of those big thrusts while we're depositing sediments, after, we're still trying to figure out the timing of that, so we can have some accommodation space forming as a result of that. But we really don't see the basin floor, as you might say, drop out until we get much higher in the section to the Macaw Formation. So the Hoko River and the Macaw Formation is kind of when we start to see these really thick accumulations of submarine fan deposits. And we also see this distinct shift in sediment provenance in both of those units. So we don't have an age of the Hoko River Formation. I have been trying various samples from that unit to try to get an age, and none of them have worked out so far. But we do have tuffs in the lowermost part of the Macaw, and those right now, I'm still dating them, but it seems like it's going to be somewhere between 30 and 31 MA.
Oh,
so
that young! Oh my God! Wow!
Right at the Eocene-Oligocene boundary. So
we might not to push the narrative too much, but again, the way I'm understanding it, we got more than 10 million years of delay between accretion of insular and Nanaimo floor dropping out at 84. And potentially you've got more than 10 million years, even though it's a hot collision, you might have as much as 10 million years delay between accreting Yakutat Siletzia before you have obvious floor dropping with the Macaw. Is that what you're saying, potentially?
I think that's the most substantial increase in subsidence we see. But, you have the Aldwell, then you have the Lyre, which is this really interesting unit because it's these coarse-grained sandstones and conglomerates up to boulder size. So, generally when I think about deep marine fan or distal fan systems, I don't generally associate it with boulder conglomerates. So that's a really interesting unit that we have to think about. And I think it actually is reworking the lowermost Aldwell. When we look at the Aldwell just in general, we look at the DZ and it looks identical to the Aldwell, and all of the conglomerate class are like metasediments, they're sedimentary, reworked sedimentary rocks. So they look pretty similar to each other outside of, one is a giant conglomerate, and there's a big unconformity between the two of them. And so we have this influx of coarse grained material, because the Aldwell, you can just think of that as a pile of mud. It's just like a pile of silt. There's nothing too exciting about it. And then we have all of these boulder cobble conglomerates out into the basin. So this big influx of coarse grained material. And then you start to see Hoko River Formation, which are these really lithic, rich, deep marine turbidites. So we are getting some subsidence there. And then we really see a ton of subsidence with the Macaw. So the Hoko River, I think, is, to give you an idea, the Aldwell is around 800 meters thick, and The Lyre Formation is maybe 600. And then the Hoko, you start to see this increased subsidence. It can be up to 1,600 meters thick, but the Macaw can be up to 2,800 meters thick. So we have just created a huge amount of space in our basin to fill this hole with all these submarine fan deposits, turbidites. So,
I mean, the more I hear from you right now, the more familiar it does sound, just generally with this Nanaimo. Like I don't think it's crazy to be doing this. Is my general thought as I continue to hear the conglomerates, the coarse stuff coming in. I mean, and I don't want to push it anymore, but I think the last thing I want to just ask about the rapid subsidence is, and again, you're not ready to publish anything on this. Why is the floor, just generally, what are the thoughts of tectonically about what does this floor dropping mean? Why is it happening both in both stories? What are the tectonic reasons for a floor dropping after a collision?
Yeah, I can share my screen and just show.
Yeah, let's do that.
The model real quick.
Oh, you're doing great. Oh, you always do so great. I'm just so impressed with you, and I know the viewers are too. So just please keep doing what you're doing. We got 800 watching, and here comes. And I'm going to share it, and then I'm going to make it real full. So we're going to go away. How about that?
Yep.
Let's go that and that. Okay.
Okay.
And can you swap displays, please?
Yep, I can swap the display. I was going to say, you've seen the wrong one.
Thank you. Yep.
Let's.
Oh, look at this. Ooh, we get a pointer too. Nice. Excellent.
Okay. So this is what I was saying with the Aldwell. So here we are in the Northern Olympic Peninsula. This is the stratigraphic column here. So the Aldwell is this lowermost unit. It's highlighted in black here, but it's really this big pile of siltstone and mud. And so I kind of walk through the different potential models for this. This is a cross-section view through the Silesia terrain. So this is just following collision. And so the Aldwell could have been deposited kind of on this pre-existing topography on the oceanic plateau. So it could represent these pre to post-collisional basins. I think it all really depends what we want to do with this rhyolite that's 52 MA. Because this Aldwell, if we're just going to go with 47 MA, then it would all be a post-collisional basin. But anyway, we have these siltstones that are being the first sediments deposited out on this oceanic plateau after it's collided. So we have some shortening there. And then when we move to the Lyre Formation, again, this is this conglomeratic unit. You can see this cobbled conglomerate has really rounded clasts. This is the unconformity between the underlying Aldwell, and then this is a really coarse-grained sand, a conglomerate of the Lyre Formation. There's Mike and Ken at the contact there. And so this could be deposited as we're still having this shortening. But one of the other things we have to think about in this model is we have to, at some point, get this outboard migration of our subduction zone. So once we accrete the plateau, we need to move the subduction zone outboard. So when does this happen? That's one of the questions. And does this Lyre Formation, this influx of coarse-grained material into our basin, represent that time frame? And then after we've had that happen, we have the Hoko River Formation. This is really characterized by fine-grained, lithic-rich, deep marine turbidites. In some local areas, you can get these really coarse-grained conglomerates. You can see that is a clast of columnar basalt. So this thing is probably not moving far from its source, and we know Silesia is a bunch of basalt. And so we see these other slump features in some of the turbidites. And so we kind of interpret that we're still getting this local deposition. We're not really getting many sediments from the continent at this time. And that's mainly one of the big shocks when I ran the DZ is that you can see the peak age population is this 52. And it's really unimodal. We're not seeing a lot of influx of sediments that match Rangelia or the Coast Plutonic complex until we get to this upper part. And so we think a lot of the sediments are being derived just maybe still from these pre-existing topographic highs on the Silesia terrain. You can see these were the DZ spectra from the Lyre and the Aldwell. They look almost identical. Here they do have peak age populations that match some of the Rangelia source terrains and Coast Plutonic complex, but we don't see that in the Hoco River Formation. So that was a really big surprise there. And we don't see it again until we get to this Macaw Formation. And this is that unit that can be up to almost 2,800 meters thick. It has that tophaceous unit at the base. And here we see this shift from lithic-rich sandstones that were really dominated by basalt and lithic or chert clasts. And sandstone grains, we get this shift to more feldspathic, even micaceous sands. And our peak age populations really shift. And I think these are what look pretty similar to peak age populations we see in the Nanaimo. And previous work done on this unit that also was really supporting that a lot of these sediments have to be reworking the Nanaimo group or other source terrains in the Rangelia or the Coast Plutonic. And that kind of matches the shift to more feldspathic micaceous sandstones and matches this shift in our peak age populations there. And so this is really when we see this huge increase in subsidence. And let's see, I guess I don't need to share this anymore.
Should I?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Is that good? Okay.
Well,
yeah.
So, well, you had one more slide. Was that Yakutat stuff? I mean.
Oh, yeah, that's Yakutat stuff.
Well, you know, so I do want to, I called this show Yakutat Parallels. So that's the last thing I want to do. And viewers, thank you for your patience. This is another 10 minutes. This is too good to just stop right here. But those graphics were super helpful to reinforce what we were talking about earlier. Are you wanting to stay away from possible tectonic interpretations for why the drop? Or is that...
I think it's, remember this thing was really hot when it collided. And so what's really common in other oceanic plateaus that we think when they collided when they were hot or when they were younger is that there has to be some degree of thermal subsidence following collision. So a lot of that subsidence can still be tectonically driven, but it's because this plateau is cooling now. It's been removed from its heat source and it's going to cool, and we're going to increase subsidence, and we're going to increase room to deposit all these basin sediments.
Well, maybe you can figure out what I'm driving at, which is, in addition to that, Mike's so hot on this migrating spreading ridge business that I'm wondering not only if you have a heating and then a cooling in response to some sort of spreading ridge migrating north or south along the coast, but then if we like that, then are we talking about a migrating spreading ridge 84 million years ago, and we have this big change in the Nanaimo? You can stay away if you want, but is Mike hot? Mike gave a talk at Denver a couple months ago. Wasn't he talking about that migrating spreading ridge business?
Yeah, he was looking at the spreading ridge because he wants it to migrate south before it then has to come back north to where it presently is, and then also looking at kind of restoring the offset of the near trench plutons all the way from, the Pacific Northwest all the way up into Western Alaska. So, bringing those back down and restoring them along strike slip faults.
Well, it is attractive to me to take what we know from the Eocene with that story and then try to jump back a few tens of millions of years and see if we can do something there as well. But I know that's kind of way out there. So let's not go there. Viewers, give me 5 more minutes, please. Give us 5 more minutes, please. Can we look at that last slide with just, you have done some field work up in the Yakutat area, Southeast Alaska, not only last summer, but way back when you were an undergrad? Or can you just comment on first of all, by the way, is anybody using a name for the Yakutat Siletzia when it was one big hunk down here, or that just there's not even a pet name out there? You just call it Siletzia, even though it's more than that?
No, yeah, I don't think there is a name when they are together. I think sometimes I've said, Siletzia Yakutat composite, or,
Right.
if they were together when they hit the Northwest. But no one has like a name just for that, when that short time period when they would have been.
Yeah, I think we need one for sure. But anyway, let's look at that last slide, because for those that are new to thinking about this, if you're confused why this show is called Yakutat, which is up in Alaska, Erin and maybe others, I'll bring your slide in a second, are, I don't know how controversial it is, but you guys are thinking that Yakutat was connected to Siletzia down here with this story, and then we slice the thing and send half north. Before we look at this image, is that controversial? Does everybody see it that way?
No, it is definitely debated. So you can think of, there is also a long distance transport option for the Yakutat, and there's also a short, or like a more moderate. So long distance transport would be the 1,500 kilometers or 1,300, whatever it is exactly, to get it up there. Short would be about 600 kilometers. And so it would have originated much further north along the Cordillera, and had a much shorter way to go. So there are two, I would say, main interpretations for the translation history of the Yakutat as well.
So it's almost like there's a separate 1 to 10 scale for that discussion. And I guess if you and Mike want Yakutat way down here, you're a 10 on that scale of that story?
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to think if there's anyone who wants it a little further south. But okay. I think this is kind of the more. I think this might be
interesting.
About as far
really fascinating. Yeah. that fits in nicely to what we've been doing also. Let's. I got two shared screens for you for some reason. Let me grab the bottom one.
Yeah.
And same idea. Can you, what are we looking at here? Full. Perfect.
That's the right one. Okay.
Yeah.
Where is the laser? Okay.
Excellent.
So this is the Yakutat terrain. So this is the other fragment of Oceanic Plateau that we think was part of the Siletzia terrain, down at the latitude of the Pacific Northwest at around 50 MA. So between its collision at 50 MA, we have to get it to present because it's currently subducting beneath southern Alaska. You can see this dashed line is the extent that the Yakutat terrain is beneath the Alaska margin here. And we need to get it up to Alaska between when it collided at 50 MA and now. And so what makes some of these translation histories a little difficult is because people want it to collide with the continental margin or the Alaska margin at different times, and they want it to originate at different times, or at different latitudes. This slide was really kind of the highlight that our collision, the Yakutat terrain collision, is much different than what we see with Siletzia, right? We have this extensive fold and thrust belt that forms on the Yakutat terrain, and it creates some of the highest topography we see in Alaska. So this is sea level. We're in the helicopter. We're flying over Icy Bay, and this is Mount St. Elias. And so this is, it creates some of the highest coastal topography, this collisional event here. And so this really kind of shows, it's just a cartoon, a schematic of how we would need to translate the Yakutat terrain up to where it's currently colliding. So people that have more of a short-term transport history in mind, it would kind of originate somewhere around here. And most people want it colliding in the Miocene. We see some of the biggest exhumation based off of thermochronology, I think around 15 MA, but it's really, there's multiple studies out there and it's debated on when, because we have this large portion that's currently subducted beneath Alaska, when does that start interacting with this Alaska margin? So some people could even want it in the Eocene time, some of this, which you would have to have a short-term transport history for it to hit by the Eocene. And then other people would want it to start more south and make its way up and maybe hit somewhere between 20 and 30 MA. That's what we're really trying to figure out. So the timing of when this thing's initially interacting with the margin, and where it originated. And that's what we want to do by looking at the sedimentary strata that are sitting on top of the Yakutat terrain. And that's kind of where this coast plutonic complex and this increased resolution and our detrital zircon age spectra comes into play. So these are all the different areas I looked at this past summer when I was up there doing field work. So kind of 3 key areas. You see, this is a very large area. These are tens of miles apart, hundreds of miles apart. So we were trying to look at along strike changes in provenance by collecting samples and looking at depositional environments to really understand that. So these are just some photos from the field. You can see we have in the Robinson Mountains some pretty significant topography. The unit that's going to be really critical for testing this is a unit called the Coltieth Formation. And in this Coltieth Formation, we want to kind of track the Yakutat terrain's transport up the Cordillera. So,
oh, wow. I love this.
Yes, from Robinson Cecil's work on the Coast Plutonic complex. So we think if we can increase the resolution of our DZ spectra, we could start identifying these variations in the peak ages or the ages of the magmatic flare-ups we see along the Coast Plutonic complex.
Oh my God.
So that's really the goal of sampling these DZs in the lower, in the middle, and the upper part of the Coltieth. Can we distinguish these peaks in the provenance data to figure out where Yakutat originated and then how fast it was making its way along the Cordilleran margin?
I mean, that slide right there, I mean, that really excites me. And that is going to, I can use that with Robinson maybe, or have you been working with Robinson Cecil on this at all?
No, we have just read a bunch of the papers and been following it closely. So, because
this is the last thing we'll do before we go to the viewers, but like, I'm so excited because I think I had it before talking to you, but I think that graphic really helps me, as opposed to the Nanaimo, which seems to have this steady zircon signature potentially during all of its northward transport. If you're a Baja BC person, you, with these sediments on top of the Yakutat, might have a changing story as that Yakutat moves north, because you're sampling or you're tapping into different parts of the CPC that's not homogeneous. Am I getting that basically?
Yeah, so it has experienced magmatic flare-ups at different times at different places along the Coast Plutonic complex.
At different places, yeah, at different places, right. So it's okay. God dang, that is good. Okay, well, I think I want to go to the viewers unless you have anything else. Did you have anything else? I mean, you did a great job. All right. Well, let's viewers. There's plenty to dig into here. Erin, you got another 10 minutes? My God, it's already, what is it, your time? 1:30 already or something almost? All right. Well, we're eating up the middle of your day here.
Fine.
Uppercase viewers, and let's just try a few of these. Sky Cooley. Hello, Sky. A question about the CPC. We can try with you, Erin. Does the CPC grow younger as you go north? Do you happen to know the general trend of those flare-ups?
Yeah, I know stuff based off of Robinson Cecil's work and some some previous work that was done on the Colthiath, kind of trying to understand what ages we would expect at different parts in the Coast Plutonic complex. But we do see that in that last slide I showed, that southern part of the Coast Plutonic complex is kind of missing those younger ages. So we can expect like the like 60 MA peak, I think it is, the further you go to the north.
Wow. Okay, let's keep it going. David Newton, what is the transport rate for the Yakutat? Do you have any back of the envelope stuff
Yeah,
for us?
I did do that this morning just in case. And that's kind of what really got me thinking that, oh, it really depends like how far you want to move it. And then when do you want it to first start interacting with southern Alaska? So I think I had used 1,500 kilometers. And then I had it colliding after, I think, 30 million years. So that would put it around 20 MA. And I think it's around like 6 to 7 centimeters a year. So it's not outrageous, but very back of the envelope, just quick calculation this morning.
6 to 7 centimeters per year is just a basic number to throw out there for this system. And viewers, if you're totally confused why we're doing this today, this is all, Erin's working on stuff that's younger than Baja BC. So what the hell are we doing? Why didn't we do this last winter? I hope you can see why we're doing this. We're trying to take things from closer to present day, where we have ongoing work, and then eventually go backwards in time and try to use some of what we've learned here to help us better understand what potentially was happening during Baja BC time. I'm down to live. Looks like you've got some. If you see a question or two, Erin, just go for it. I can see your screen is scrolling as well. Well, she doesn't know about the rims of the zircon. She zaps them. I think that's what I heard. Mark wonders, is there a danger of having reworked zircons in the CPC that might give an erroneous signature?
So, I mean, I think...
Interesting.
I guess what kind of reworked zircons? These are kind of looking at the magmatic flare-ups, so those would be the igneous ones. But yes, this is intruded. Like, there are many other source terrains that are in that area intruding ringalia. It depends how far you're sourcing sediments from. And so the Coast Plutonic complex, or the DZ spectra, well, they're not DZ, they're just age spectra that I showed, are for the igneous zircons and those different parts of the Pluton. But you can always rework other, in a sedimentary unit, things that might have been exposed that we no longer see at the surface anymore with this amount of exhumation. But we're trying to kind of look at those peak age populations. But there's certainly other sources that could be supplying sediments. We're not expecting our DZ spectra to match those perfectly, because there might be age populations there that aren't present just from the magmatic flare-ups, because there's a ton of other units exposed along the Cordilleran margin.
Well, there are. Let's do a quick roll call of those other units that are known sources in the work you've done so far. Down in the peripheral rocks, you have a source that's definitely CPC, but what other grains that you know for sure where they came from, according to your interpretations?
Well, we haven't dove too deep into it yet. That's definitely on the docket for when I'm writing up this paper next year. But we think we're definitely having stuff come in, especially once it's younger, from the continental margin. So maybe more the Cascades or the Melange belts that are out there. So more kind of east to west. And that signature is kind of a little stronger in the Blue Mountain unit. And then there's a bunch of other units that are exposed on southern Vancouver Island and San Juan Islands. And then so other units that make up ringalia than essentially just the Coast Plutonic complex. There's a bunch of Triassic and Paleozoic things, and but I don't have like a name of an exact group that I could tie to a peak age population just yet.
But unlike the Nanaimo, you don't have like 35% of your grains clearly coming from that have a super outrageous unknown source. Pretty much, it looks like everything's coming from the neighborhood, roughly.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I haven't found anything yet
Yeah.
that we're like, how would this age fit in? I think we can find something within that age range that would make sense for where it would be coming from.
Well, you're being a good sport. I'm kind of putting pressure on you now to say some stuff that's premature for sure. People are asking about fossil evidence or paleomag on the Yakutat. I mean, do you feel like you know enough about some of that to comment here?
So there is limited data. I think there is some paleomag from the Yakutat from like it's not from the Yakutat sediments that are exposed at the surface. They did a bunch of drilling and of the subsea part of the sediments. So beneath the ocean, that's where a majority of the Yakutat is below sea level. So there's been drill cores and studies out looking at those sediments out on the ocean floor. And then there's limited foram data and some fossil data. And it's some of that from these early studies by George Plafker that we got some of these original ideas that Yakutat had to have originated at least some distance more south because those forams and some of the other fossils would have originated at latitudes that were much more south. So,
thank you for that. Here's another oddball question coming from me this time. So I had my 5 steps. I don't know how much you like them or not, but the 5th step is getting the stuff back out of the ocean. So somebody asked about the Nanaimo to Jerome, and I think Jerome was like, "Oh boy, I don't know. Let me think about that. Like, why is the Nanaimo back up, visible?" And I think Jerome by email eventually thought, well, I guess we bring in Silesia/Yakutat, we fold everything, and we bring things out of the water. I don't know how controversial that is. When did your peripheral rocks come back out of the water?
Yeah, that is a good question. There's been a lot of work done on the Olympic core because if you've ever looked at the map pattern of the Olympic Peninsula, it makes this dome shape. And Mark Brandon has done a lot of work trying to understand exhumation of the Olympic core. And so that is rapidly coming up in the Miocene time period. So that's still when the uppermost part of the units I'm interested in studying are getting deposited. But we know today that the plate configurations have changed, and we know that there is a massive amount of sediments essentially thrust beneath the Olympic core today. And there's kind of like this remnant arch in the subducting slab. So we have exhumed all of that, but I don't know off the top of my head when exactly my rocks came back to the surface, but there is a ton of underthrust sediments beneath the Olympic core now.
Good. How about one more? I saw a couple people asking this. So with respect to the Queen Charlotte Fault and moving Yakutat north, you're pretty high on the 1 to 10 scale, not to put words in your mouth, but you want Yakutat down here and you want it all the way up to Alaska. Where are you so far on the Baja BC 1 to 10 scale? I mean, I don't know how much you've thought about this stuff, but what's your impression so far, if you have any impressions about large-scale transport back during Baja BC time?
Yeah, I like, obviously, a lot of transport distance. I think for that, I'm still probably sitting around a 7, and that has a lot to do with some of my undergraduate work, and maybe not necessarily motion that was prior to 50 MA, but I'm more concerned about the amount of motion we would need post 50 MA as well. So some of the rocks that I studied in Southern Alaska for my undergrad is a Paleocene sedimentary basin, and that looks like it was sourcing sediments from the Chugach terrain. And we haven't really talked about the Chugach Prince William terrain.
Right.
Also is a lot of work that Daryl Cowan has done. He has a 2003 paper, and I think it's revisiting the Baranoff leach schist hypothesis that the Chugach has also originated much more south. And so we would need to get that all the way up to southern Alaska where it is today. So there's this whole other transport history of this unit that a lot of the work that me and my colleagues of Jeff Traub, Ken Ridgway had done up in southern Alaska would suggest that Chugach was sourcing some of those sediments to that basin, so we might need it up there a little earlier. So there, I think there's some reconciling that to be done between Pacific Northwest, southern Alaska geology. But, you know, it's I haven't thought about it in a long time. Undergrad was a while ago. So it's been really fun to revisit it now, especially that I have a lot more experience, and I've been able to work with Paul. And so it's just been this great kind of experience looking at both sides of this big controversy. So it's been really fun, but I think that, we need to make all the data work. And we need to all collaborate. So that's really the big thing that needs to happen now. So.
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of yours, obviously, and the fact that you're in the live chat for many of the shows means a lot. And I have heard back from Ken Ridgway, one of your advisors, that he's willing to join us, I guess in late January or early February or something. And I'm going to ask Mike Eddy to maybe do a show with us, and if you'd want to come back during those shows or after them or before them or whatever. But like, I think it was smart that we kind of kept away from Chugach and some of this other near trench and all that stuff we were doing last winter. But I think it does need to be thrown in a little bit, maybe John Garver even. So I don't know, we'll kind of maybe have a cluster of those shows late in the series to kind of revisit some of this that we've kind of flirted with here today. But that's plenty. It's 10:34 here, and God knows what it is there. So, hey, you did great. Thank you so much, Erin.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Thank you for inviting me on again.
All right, you bet. Well, we'll look for you. We'll stay in touch, but we'll maybe look for a return appearance from you if you're willing later in the alphabet. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. Have a good day, whatever's left of it, and have a good holidays as well.
Thank you, too.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Excuse me. Erin Donaghy from Purdue University, PhD student. Supervisors, Dr. Mike Eddy and Dr. Ken Ridgway. Thank you, Erin. A toast to you. Thank you for joining us on this snowy Sunday morning. Sunheit. Thanks to Erin Donaghy as she continues to work hard on her project and her time here this morning. Here's to you, Erin. Hope everything's well in your world, the best that can be expected this time of year. In darkness, we've got the freezing fog thing. Every day is kind of the same now, you know, and it's supposed to get cold again. So I'm grateful to have this with you. It just gives me something to do. So here's to us. One more time. Here's the Stewart Range, just north of Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Is this the Coast Plutonic Complex? Yes or no? I'm going to be asking that in the next two shows with our guests. Actually, beyond that, Bob Miller after that. now that we're realizing the CPC is our next focal point, in case that isn't obvious to you, I'm saying that right now. For the next few shows, we're still in British Columbia, but we're going to the CPC. But I'm wondering, do we have to go to British Columbia? Can these rocks with the frickin' larch right over there be a stone's throw away and still see this very important Coast Plutonics complex? So when will those next few shows be? Next time I see you will be Wednesday, December 14th at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Our guest will be Dr. Robinson Cecil from Northridge, the Los Angeles area. And then next Saturday will be next Saturday will be Margie Russmore at 9 a.m. Pacific. Why not? Let's just finish it out. A week from this morning, Sunday, December 18th, will be Dr. Bob Miller from San Jose State University. And finally, Wednesday, December 21st, our last show before the Christmas break, the holiday break, will be Dr. Stacia Gordon, University of Nevada, Reno. Thanks to all of those fine folks for agreeing to join us. Most of them returning guests. Margie Russmore, a brand new guest. And so, one last toast to you, one more wet of my whistle. What? No food props today, so I simply say thank you, I love you, and goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. End stream.